today. I am Nia Rayner, the Sampson County Board of Elections Interim Director. Thank you for working with us during this transition. I know this is a different time, but your efforts and volunteering to work with us for the benefit of Sampson County and all of voters for Sampson County is really appreciated.
Good morning, Sampson County. My name is Parker Holland. I'm a security and support technician with the North Carolina State Board of Elections, covering District 5, which includes Sampson County, as well as 12 others. So there's a good chance we will run into each other during the early voting process. And I look forward to meeting you all, and I want to say thank you so much for all that you do for the voters of Sampson County. We greatly appreciate you as one-stop officials, as precinct officials. You all are the backbone of elections. Thank you so much.
The topics we will cover today is general rules and guidelines, voting sites, layouts, and signs, the early voting process, SOSA training, the stations, and also COVID-19 response. The central principles. As you can see, we're to be guided by the North Carolina law, be consistent and uniform, be committed to the election's integrity, and we are not to turn anyone away without offering appropriate voting options. Elections officials must administer elections laws, rules, and policies. That's your number one responsibility. Please be uniform and consistent. Election officials must facilitate a process where ballots cast by qualified and eligible voters will be counted. Elections officials must facilitate a process where the qualifications or eligibility of a voter is in question. The person will not be able to cast a ballot that will be improperly counted. We have a dual rule to ensure that every qualified and eligible voter can, without delay, cast a ballot that will be counted, and to ensure that the voters who are not qualified or eligible to vote do not cast a ballot that will be improperly counted. This is a principle that goes to the heart of the election integrity. The final decision of whether to count a ballot of a voter whose qualifications or eligibility is in question is a matter for the members of the County Board of Elections. The role of voting site officials is to put qualified and eligible voters in the best position to ensure their ballot will be counted and provide county board members with the best information to ensure that they make the proper decision under the law. Do not turn anyone away. General rules for precinct officials. All workers must take an oath. And all workers cannot be related to candidates. If you're a wife, husband, mother, father, brother, sister, you cannot work in the same precinct together. Chief judges and judges must remain all day. And if a precinct official leaves the polling place, they cannot return. Also, you all must remain nonpartisan. Remember, during early voting and on election day, we work in a process, not politics. All workers must be nonpartisan at all times. No newspapers or People magazines with candidates on the front. You must not only be nonpartisan, but you must meet a higher standard of not appealing to be partisan in any way. Procedures at voting place before voting place begins. And your appearance, as well as the reality of care, efficiency, impartiality, and honest election administrations. Also, you will note that the ballot styles and amounts you are issued at supply pickup. You will be given a reconciliation form. When you reconcile at the end of the night, you will account for the number of ballots and ballot style, not just the total numbers of ballots that you have. One-stop managers, you will have a different form than on screen. We will go over it with you in more detail once we call you in.
Right. So before we dig into early voting layouts, best practices, I want to talk to you just briefly on the differences between early voting and election day. At early voting, you will be writing the application number and the precinct number on the ballot. You can also accept absentee by mail ballots at your early voting location. And I cannot stress this enough. Do not, at the end of the day of early voting, please, please, please do not close the polls. You will either power down or just close the lid depending on what the practice is for your county. All right, so let's talk about your early voting layout. This is more important than ever that we're uniformed in this because of our response to COVID-19. But we want to ensure that anybody can access the early voting location. Ensure that should a line form at a check-in station, there's room for a line and it won't impede traffic, cause people to be standing in a doorway and blocking traffic from others. Again, you will be doing this at a 6-foot social distancing protocol. Ensure that any lines with the enclosure do not cross. Again, this is more important than ever as we are living in this age of COVID. You want to place your booths to ensure voter privacy, again, maintaining that 6 feet social distancing. You want to make sure that those booths are easy for officials to see and clear of electioneering materials and able to clean. Now we'll go over what you'll need to do about cleaning in just a little bit. You want to ensure that there are adequate number of booths. You have to, of course, remember that accessible booths must be assembled and the space between rows must conform to social distancing and accessibility standards. Let's talk briefly about signs. As voters wait in line and go from one station to another, there must be signage to direct and inform voters. Voting site stations and illustrative signage are nothing new to the voting site administration. We've been doing this for years. But the effective use of these signs and our simple concepts are key to providing a voting process that is fully compliant with North Carolina law, uniform statewide, and efficient and ultimately fair to voters and election integrity. You will not have to remember all of these signs as you will have a checklist in your packets. One of the signs that you all will be required to post is a no photo ID required poster. This sign is what it sounds like. It's inform voters that photo ID is not required to vote in this election. This sign will look very familiar to you all, as it looks very familiar to me because I actually saw many of these still posted in your DS200 tabulators when we were doing LNA testing. It's very important that we have these posted because it reminds the voters to review each of their selections on your ballot before inserting it into the tabulator. You're going to want to continue to post your eligibility signs. This sign is to assist voters in understanding what they're signing when they sign their voter authorization document. This relates back to the check boxes that are on the form. Essentially, we're informing everyone about the requirements to sign their authorization to vote form. Your morning site check. Please make sure your DS200 is on. That is your voting tabulator. That way, if there are any issues, you have the time to contact the county board for assistance. Please remember, whether it's during early voting or on election day, no one can vote before the polls open. You want to ensure that your auto mark is on. The auto mark is used by voters who are visually impaired, unable to read a ballot, have trouble holding a pen in order to mark a ballot. Please make sure that it is on at all times. You want to ensure that all stations have their required materials. The curbside call bell should have been tested during setup. Again, if it's not working, call the county board immediately. Remember that your buffer zone is clearly marked. Please remember that you are to not use an accessible space for curbside. Accessible spaces should be kept for those voters who do have an accessibility issue but would like to park and enter the voting enclosure. Curbside should also have a marked buffer zone. Please mark the voting area with proper and easily visible signage. Your county may also find it helpful to post signage that prohibits electioneering in that area. If a voting location cannot accommodate the 50 or 25-foot curbside voting buffer, a reasonable boundary should be established to ensure that the curbside area remains free of electioneering. What I always like to think of is that vehicle that the voter's in is their voting booth. We would not allow an electioneer to bring them something in the voting booth, therefore they should not have something brought to them in their vehicles. Let's talk about our early voting stations. We want everyone to know their role. The first station that you have is the check-in station. This is the first stop for the voter. Most of the processes in these steps are processes you've been doing for years. But let's go through these check-in steps together. Remember that there's nowhere in this list does it ask every voter for a photo ID. Again, that is due to a court order that voters are not required to show a photo ID in order to vote. There's going to be a long pause here, I'm sorry. Okay, so the first step is the voter greeting. The second step is the name review. The third step is the address review. The fourth step is the voter station review. And the final step is determining the eligibility and voting authorization. So after you greet the voter, say thank you for voting and we are happy to have you in Sampson County or something like that, ask for the voter's name. A voter must state their name when presenting to vote in person. If a voter is unable to state their name, they may write their name. A voter is unable to state or write their name may receive assistance in doing so. If a voter refuses to state their name, check-in will arrange for the voter to speak with the chief judge on election day or the site supervisor or manager. The next thing you want to do is search for the name on record. The election official should search for the voter's name in the poll book, the electronic poll book, or labels. We're going to be using SOSA during early voting, so that is an electronic poll book. When searching for the voter on the voter list, election officials should be aware that there may be more than one voter with the same or similar name. Before determining the correct voter is located, an official must be sure to check the middle name or check for any junior or senior designations. If more information is required to determine the correct voter record, it is okay for an election official to ask that voter to provide their date of birth. If a voter's name cannot be located on the voter list, here are a few suggestions. Ask the voter to spell their name. Ask the voter if their name has changed. Ask a voter if their name is hyphenated. If you're using the SOSA poll book, you can perform a wildcard search, and we'll talk about that later on. You can, again, if you're using electronic poll book, search by the date of birth or the voter's residential address. You want to also make sure that you review the name of the voter. The address review. A voter must give their legal voting residence. A voter's legal voting residence is the address where the voter will have resided for at least 30 days as the date of the election. If the address on record is different than the stated address, confirm that you have pulled up the correct voter according to the voter's name. If you have the correct voter record, ask if they have moved. If the voter indicates they have moved, ask the voter for their previous address. If the previous address matches the name on record, ask the voter for the date of the move. If the date of the move is less than 30 days before election day, the voter is eligible to vote based on the previous address. If the date of the move is 30 days before the election, follow the unreported move procedures. If there is an address issue that cannot be resolved, a voter will be offered a provisional voting option. You will complete a help station referral form and refer the voter to the help station. Voter status review. Determine whether there are voter status issues that need to be resolved before a ballot can be issued. Here are the status issues that you may encounter. Some can be resolved at the check-in station. However, others will require that you send the voter to the help station for additional assistance. An active voter is a registered voter in the county, and there are known address issues. An inactive voter is a voter who is registered to vote in the county, but the County Board of Elections could not verify or is unsure of their correct physical or mailing address. An ID required designation indicates that this is a first-time voter who at the time of their initial registration did not provide verifiable identification. The requirement for first-time voters to show identification is a requirement of the Help of America Vote Act of 2002, otherwise known as HAVA. This is separate from the North Carolina photo ID requirement. Acceptable forms of HAVA ID include a current and valid, unexpired photo identification, or a copy of one of the following documents that shows the name and address of the voter: a current utility bill, a bank statement, a government check, a paycheck, or other government document. Please note that this can be an electronic document, such as a bank statement via a mobile device. Okay, you have an absentee or already voted. If the record indicates that the voter has already cast a ballot, the election official should reconfirm that the correct voter record has been located in the voter list. Removed. If the voter is no longer considered to be registered to vote in the county, you will receive this message. You will also see denied. The voter registration application was deemed not qualified to vote by the County Board of Elections. You may only vote a provisional ballot if this designation occurs. Let's talk about determination of the voter's eligibility and voting authorization. If the election official determines that the voter is qualified and eligible to vote, you will state the voter's name and residential address to confirm the voter is duly registered to vote, and issue the voter a vote authorization document. Let's talk about the ballot station. Once you have confirmed the voter's eligibility to receive a ballot, you will send them to the ballot station. You want to make sure that you have your checklist, ensure that you have required forms including a spooled ballot log, a tabulator match sheet, and a 10, 2, and 4 sheet. Ballots must be kept orderly and secure, and a best practice is to assign 2 people if more than one ballot style is being issued, which of course at early voting, we will definitely have more than one. At the ballot station, you're going to receive and review the application. You're going to make sure it is signed. You're going to ensure that it's initialed, and if their voter status issues, they have been satisfied. And of course, confirm that the correct ballot style was confirmed. You will be using the scanners this year. Remember to scan the ATV and scan the ballot, and you're going to be looking for a happy beep. This will help you ensure that you have pulled the correct ballot. And here's our slide actually addressing that. At the ballot station, make sure that you know the process for a jurisdiction or a jurisdiction dispute. You know how and when to spool a ballot. And remember, a voter may only have one ballot at a time. If a voter makes a mistake and needs to remark a ballot, they cannot have the old ballot back, but they will need to have that ballot spooled, and they will have to receive their new ballot, which they cannot have in possession at the same time as their old ballot. Your application management. Please place your applications in a notebook or on a spindle, something like that. Your site manager should flip through regularly to ensure that all forms are complete. The health of your early voting location is reflected in the completeness and accuracy of your one-stop application forms. You want to again ensure that if you are the site manager that you flip through them on a regular basis to ensure all is well. Your match sheet. You want to ensure that you have the match sheet to make sure that, again, your tabulator and ATVs and ballots cast all match. If you do not do this on a regular basis, you will end up staying an extra hour or more at the end of the day trying to figure out why the total on your DS200 and the amount of ATVs do not equal. If at any point your numbers do not match, inform your one-stop supervisor immediately. Let's talk about the curbside process. You have 10 steps for curbside. This sheet that's on the PowerPoint is a great reference. It's a prompt reminder for all the steps in the curbside process. Remember that there is a buffer zone. Remember that observers may observe at curbside. They can listen for voters to state their name and address. They may not hover close enough to see voter ballot choices, and they may not board buses or enter vehicles. Getting started at curbside. When heading out to assist curbside voters, your curbside officials will need multiple items, including the curbside log, the quick reference guide, a pen, and of course a clipboard or hard surface to write on. The curbside voting procedures are an expanded version of the check-in procedure. The voter must still state their name, address, and they must also state their party affiliation in a party primary, which of course this is a general election and they will not be doing this year. The station guide lays out the process in 3 segments: exterior, interior, then exterior again. The curbside official must assemble the proper voting materials based on whether the voter is being issued a regular ballot or a provisional ballot. If a regular ballot is issued, you will need the ATV or one-stop application, a privacy sleeve, and the ballot. If it is a provisional ballot, the official would gather the provisional voting application, the privacy sleeve, the ballot, the provisional envelope, and the provisional voter instructions. Remember, when you're completing the curbside process, review the documents with the voter to ensure the information on the form is correct. You will also indicate the areas on the relevant form that requires the voting signature. You will obtain signatures and then provide the voter with voting materials. You will allow the voter to vote while monitoring the curbside area from a distance. Collect the materials and return to the enclosure with a ballot. Return to the voting enclosure and get a judge or chief judge or early voting, the one-stop supervisor, to insert the ballot into the tabulator. Return to the car and tell the voter their ballot has been cast and thank them for coming out. And we're going to transition to SOSA training at this point, and we're going to review a typical voter, updating an address, and inactive voters in same-day registration. Alright, so now we're going to review SOSA voting. Each individual will have a specific user ID and password. They will be given to you before early voting begins. You will want to ensure to get to this screen that you double click on the SOSA voting icon. Once you click on the SOSA voting icon, you will enter in your user ID and password. And you will not want to put it in incorrectly. If you get this get this SOSA load warning, that is okay. We will need to call the Board of Elections and they will tell you how to resolve this issue. This should be how your screen will look after you've logged in. You will get the information of the election date, where you are working at. For instance, this one is at the old Badcock building. You will see that the validation status has occurred. You'll get an ID number as well as the date that it was validated. From here, you will click OK. Now, you have a pretty simple process here. You can either search, enter, tab. Those are going to be some of your best friends. So let's walk through a typical voter. Let's say Jacqueline Jones comes to vote. Now, I can't spell Jacqueline, but I clearly heard her say that. So remember that your best friend is Shift 5 or the wildcard key. And remember, in SOSA, less is more. I do not need to fill out the middle name or the date of birth. Let's say Jacqueline B. Jones tells me she resides at 528 Margaret Street in Clinton, North Carolina. I have found her very easily. She has the green check mark, which means that she is ready to go. At this point, I will hit Issue. If Jacqueline's standing right in front of me, I'm going to click on Issue in Person. Upon issuing in person, typically it will go to another screen, but for right now, since we're in a training module, I have to play with it because I don't have a printer available. But typically it'll go straight to this screen in step 2. Again, you're going to review that Jacqueline B. Jones resides at 528 Margaret Street in Clinton, North Carolina. If she concurs and that information is correct, you're going to click Vote. It is very important that you hit Vote instead of exiting out of that screen, because until you hit the green voted checkbox, the transaction is not complete. This is more often than not one of the easiest ways to have your numbers not match during early voting. Shortly after you've clicked Vote, you will now see that I have the stop sign saying that they cannot vote because they have already voted. This is how the majority of your transactions should go throughout the day. So let's go over a different scenario. Say James Jones comes in to vote and he says that he lives at 319 Maple Street in Roseboro, North Carolina. Now, I'm going to ask him. I have a James Alton Jones that resides at 836 Meyer Naylor Road in Harrells, North Carolina. He says, yes, that is my former address. I moved in September and I never updated my address. Well, we know that we can go ahead and update his address at early voting. We have the option to go to the second blue gentleman up here that says update our voter registration. Now, he told me he resides at 319 Maple Street in Roseboro. At this point, I'm going to update his residential address. Please note that anything that is in red will need to be updated. Now, as you can see, it's actually pre-populating the information. To make life easier, you can actually hit on the View Street Ranges. And as I said, they reside in Roseboro, and 319 is an odd number, so I'm going to click on the last street range. This will ensure that all the information is populated correctly. At this point, I would hit Review. And again, Mr. Jones is standing in front of me, so I'm going to select In Person. The one-stop forms will be printed again. They will come out, but for right now, we're putting them on our screen. You will have Mr. Jones, or whoever the voter may be, review this information, ensure that it's correct, and sign in all appropriate locations. And then, of course, you're going to hit Vote. And you can see on the screen that the 319 Maple Street in Roseboro has already taken place, and we have now voted Mr. Jones. And now we're going to talk about an inactive voter. Say that Jasmine N. Smith comes to vote. Jasmine N. Smith tells me she resides at 1675 New Hope Church Road in Turkey, North Carolina. But again, we see here in the bottom of the screen that she is inactive. That means she may not have been able to verify her address. Well, we know we're going to need to update her voter registration. As you can see, I cannot issue it because it's grayed out. So I'm going to click again on our second blue man. It says Update Voter Registration. And Jasmine still states she lives at 1675 New Hope Church Road, but she says, oh,
I may have not given my mailing address when I registered to vote. It's P.O. Box 1 in Turkey. Well, we know at this point we will need to update the mailing address. So we are going to say P.O. Box 1. I highly doubt that'll be anybody's address, but that's okay. And you can again fill this information out. Zip code is 28393. All right. And at this point, again, I'm going to hit review. Jasmine's standing right in front of me, so I'm going to hit select. And again, the forms would print out, but because of our training module, we're just going to send it to the screen. And you've heard me say this numerous times, and I cannot stress this enough. You will need to ensure you hit the green check mark and vote. And you see how quick that happens. It's voted, and now we have the mailing address. You might have seen me do this, but I cannot stress enough again that you hit the clear eraser in between every search. And finally, one of the things we're going to review is a new voter registration. Remember, during early voting, you can register and vote at the same time. Let's say that Thomas Holland comes to vote. And he resides at 101 Laurel Woods Lane. He tells us this, we can hit search here, or if you've seen me do this throughout, you can hit enter. Well, I cannot find Thomas Holland anywhere. I'm going to clear it out and say, ask for the date of birth. And I typed in, and he tells me it's 12/8/92. I've typed it in, and I'm not seeing Thomas Holland anywhere. You may ask, Mr. Holland, have you registered before? And his response will be not in, or it could be something to the effect of not in Sampson County. So we know we need to do a same-day registration. If you were to do that, you're going to click on New Voter Registration. And then Mr. Holland will have to fill out a voter registration form, and which you will take from him and put in all the information that is provided. Again, all the information in red is required. And I'm doing this just at random, not based on a registration I have in front of me like you will be doing. And again, when I have that information in front of me, it'll be a little bit easier. But please remember to use your view street range. Again, this is an odd range number, so I'm going to double click on the second one. I know that I'm clicking on the odd range because it has O or E, and O, of course, stands for odd. Now, the voter information of gender, race, and ethnicity is not required, but if they provide it, you will need to fill it in. You would want to try to make sure that you definitely get somebody who's doing a same-day registration's telephone number, as that way we can have a good contact number for them in the event that there's an issue. Again, party is required. And at this point, I'm set to review. Now, if you perhaps forget something, SEAMS or SOSA will tell you. And this screen is telling me that there's a new voter registration error, that we cannot continue the voter registration process because the U.S. citizenship box has not been checked. And that is just an operator error. At this point, I'll hit review again. And as we were discussing earlier, when somebody is a first-time registrant in North Carolina at early voting, they have to provide what is known as a HAVA ID. It's a proof of residency. Mr. Holland chose to show us his bank statement. Mr. Holland is in front of us, so again, we'll hit in person. The forms will print, and if there are 3 forms, you need 3 signatures. If there are 2 forms, you need 2 signatures. If there's 1 form, of course, you only need 1 signature. So please ensure that you hit vote, and the forms will print out. But again, we're just putting it up here for right now. And now you can see that Mr. Holland has voted. All right. If you would like to come and train in person on the computers, they will be available. This system has not changed too much over the years, so if you're an experienced worker, it's essentially a lot of the same, but we would encourage each and every one of you to come train before early voting begins.
So now that we've talked about SOSA, let's talk about the help station. The help station is a location for private discussions with the voters about irregular situations. A voter may be sent to the station if there's an issue with the voter's registration or they're unable to receive a regular ballot. Provisional voting is typically handled at the help station. Remember that at the help station, a provisional poll booth is required. You will need to include the canvass date sign. There are many reasons that a voter may present to the help station. Voters presenting to the help station should do so with the help referral form. The most common process that will happen at the help station is assisting a voter with casting a provisional ballot. Remember though, at early voting, there are not typically a lot of provisional ballots, as we can handle somebody who is not registered to vote or who needs to update their address. And right here, you will see the provisional voting application. Remember that this application is also a voter registration application. It must indicate that the reason the voter is voting provisionally, and the voter must always sign the application as well as the election official. The provisional voter application, as I say, is a voter registration application and an update form. The election official must indicate the reason the voter is voting provisionally. You would be able to do this in SOSA during early voting and on EVID on election day. The election official may use the station guide for a description of provisional voting and reasons. Again, in SOSA or EVID, the reason will be pre-populated on the form based on the selection chosen in the application. The election official must indicate whether an ID was provided by the voter if a HOV ID was required. Again, this form will be pre-populated with the information using SOSA or EVID. Depending on the provisional voter reason, the election official may need to complete other fields on the form. Once completed, the voter must sign the form and the election official must also sign the form. We cannot stress enough how important it is to get those signatures. The provisional ballot notation should include the word provisional or PROV and the precinct where the voter should be voting. If you have a voter, this would pertain more to election day, but if you have a voter who is unable or refuses to go to the correct precinct, you should put the number of the correct precinct where the voter should be voting. If you have a voter who is voting, who needs to show a HOV ID and does not have a source with them, that number would be the precinct in which you are working. Again, this pertains more to election day. You want to please be sure that you ID the ballot before putting it in the provisional envelope and hand the open envelope with the ballot inside to the voter. Instruct the voter to go to the provisional poll booth and complete the ballot, place it back in the envelope, and seal the ballot in the envelope. Nothing other than the ballot should be inside the provisional envelope. Research should be done to determine the status of the ballot and will be based on the information on the provisional application, and any other information provided should be placed in the exterior sleeve. Let's talk about completing the provisional envelope. You will write the PIN number. This number will be on the application in the top box on the envelope that says PIN label here. You will also complete the following information: the voter's name,
the poll book number. This should match the line on the poll book such as CEN-000-1. The voting precinct, again, where the voter would vote on election day, and the ballot style issued. This must match the ballot you gave the voter and that is on the provisional application. Completing the poll book. On the line associated with the poll book number of the voter, you will write the voter's name and address, the ballot style issued, and the PIN number. This information is found on the provisional application and on the back of the envelope. The provisional voting instructions will print out. The election official will need to provide these to the voter. Inform the voter that he or she may check the status of their provisional ballot no earlier than 10 days after election day. Direct the voter to their PIN number. And again, the PIN number will be found on the application. Again and again and again, I say this to avoid confusion. This PIN number will print out of SOSA. You will want to provide the voter with information. The reason they voted provisionally, the PIN number, if their HOV ID is required, and to inform the voter of the county canvass day. Again, please ensure this information is given to them in case they need to follow up with any information. You will return the provisional poll book and completed provisional envelopes at the end of early voting. Please ensure that they are in a secure space at all times. The number of voters listed on your provisional poll book should match the number of provisional applications. Let's talk about voter assistance. Remember, you may only provide technical advice on how to complete a ballot. You cannot provide any information or advice on any contest, candidates, or referenda on the ballot. No opinions, interpretations, or paraphrases of ballot items. Each polling location or early voting location will be provided with certain things to direct the voter to that information. I cannot stress this enough. If someone asks you to read their ballot, which is fine, you must remain in an even tone at all times. You cannot get very excited about one name and then go back to a monotone voice about another. People could see that as you trying to influence a voter's decision. Again, that slide was talking a little bit about voter assistance, a little bit more of what I was just talking about. Let's talk about service animals. The ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act, requires that service animals are allowed in the polling place. The ADA requirement is limited to service animals, not comfort animals. The service animal may wear a vest, harness, or display an ID, but is not required. You may not ask the handler about the nature of his or her disability. You may ask, is this a service animal and what has the animal been trained to do? I'm personally an animal lover. I just love dogs, and it takes everything within my being to not pet the animal or ask, can I pet them? Because those dogs are working, so please remember that. Let's talk about the exit station. The exit station is exactly what it says. It is the last place that the voter is going to see. This is where they will put their ballot in the tabulator or the DS200. Please remain close enough to near the tabulator to hear any alerts, but not close enough to see a voter's choices. Understand the machine's alerts and how to address them, and we cannot stress this enough. Ensure that no provisional ballots enter the tabulator. The exit station attendant should know to direct the voter to the ballot station if they would like to spoil their ballot due to unintended selections, or if they have a concern that they were given the wrong ballot. Now, this is a moment you have all been waiting for. We're going to address COVID-19, the response measures that will be taken before voting begins, during the voting process, and after the voting locations, either early voting on election day, close.
Before and during, it is recommended that election workers self-screen for a fever and symptoms prior to work according to the CDC guidelines. High-touch areas such as voting equipments and booths must be disinfected and sanitized throughout the day. Election workers should wash their hands or use hand sanitizer after removing gloves. You all will be provided with these items. You do not have to bring your own. Remember, workers will need to be assigned for interior and exterior line control, door control, and sanitizing duties. Polling places must be arranged to ensure social distancing guidelines. Social distancing markers will be used throughout the voting place. And as much as it will disappoint the voters, I voted stickers will not be shared this election. You're instead going to be provided with a pin that has, I think, your vote count, something to that regard for the voters to take with them. We have to diligently implement safety practices. If you are sick, as much as we would want to have you and as much as we appreciate your dedication to the elections process, you must stay home. Again, you should self-screen for fever and symptoms prior to work. If they feel sick during a work shift, please, workers, report this information to the site manager or to the Board of Elections. Anyone experiencing a shortness of breath or an inability to stand on their own should be cared for immediately by calling 911 and reporting a suspected COVID-19 case with a severe symptom. Again, 6 feet social distancing should be posted throughout the voting place. Workers should wear PPE equipment that is provided, such as a mask and gloves. Assign workers to monitor key points of entry and to serve to enforce social distancing. Please disinfect and clean workspaces before and after interaction with voters and voting materials. Use caution if handling the ballots. County directors are going to provide for the master poll workers and voters who do not bring their own. Remember, poll workers are required to wear a mask. Voters are not. You may ask them to do so, and if they choose not to, you have done your due diligence. Again, face shields and gloves will be provided for the election workers, single-use pens, single-use cotton swabs for anyone using the touchscreen voting machines, such as the Automark. Again, hand sanitizer for election workers and voters, protective barriers, and please remember that PPE can be disposed of as regular trash. We're going to sanitize high-touch surfaces throughout the day. These include tables, doorknobs, the shields or the barriers, the enclosure themselves, any voting equipment, desks, phones, and keyboards. I am really bad personally about not doing this on my phone and should do better, and I hope you will do better than I do. Cleaning, disinfecting, and sanitizing. A worker is to disinfect and sanitize all high-touch areas between each voter. A worker is to disinfect and sanitize voting equipment in accordance with the manufacturer recommendations after every voter. The greeters or the door monitors will offer the mask to the voters who do not bring their own while maintaining a safe distance. Again, they are not required to, but we do need to offer it to them. You will provide hand sanitizer to voters before and after voting. And I think this is about the 5th or 6th time I've said this, but it's okay. We want you to know and be sure that you're sure that there is 6 feet distance before the next voter enters the voting place, and use your marked standing spots. At the check-in station, maintain a safe distance from voters. Provide hand sanitizer before and after voting. Encourage voters to discard or take with them the writing pens that are provided. Do not share these pens. You want to pay special attention to keeping the 6 feet away from individuals at the check-in station, and sanitize computers and paper poll books if and when a new worker signs in. So you want to make sure that if you're working at early voting for the first part of the day, you switch with somebody else to go to lunch, that computer is sanitized. The help station, ballot station, and tabulation station. Maintain a safe distance from workers.
Again, encourage voters to discard or keep their own writing pens. Do not share them. All of this will look very familiar, but please do not distribute iVoting stickers and sanitize computers and paper poll books when new workers sign in. Curbside voting. Your mask, your face shield, and gloves are always on because you're going to be coming closer than 6 feet with a voter at curbside. Maintain a safe distance from voters. Approach the vehicle and offer hand sanitizer before and after. Use precautions when handling your ballots after use. Please, 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 and sanitize the privacy folders, the clipboards after each use. And of course, encourage voters to use the one-time use pens that will be provided. Do not share the pens.
Okay.
After the voting locations close, the voters must be cleaned and sanitized. The voting equipment must be thoroughly disinfected during and after packing, and the voting locations must be returned to their precinct, the pre-election condition.
That concludes our presentation and training. I want to thank each and every one of you for dedicating your time to be a poll worker and also to go through training. If you have any questions, please contact us at the Board of Elections. The number is 910-592-5796. Your chief judges and managers will also be in contact with you, but I want to thank you all again.